Jason Miller sat alone on the last bench at the downtown bus terminal, his jacket zipped up tight against the crisp mountain air. The lights from the diner across the street flickered behind a layer of fog that clung to the pavement. He stared at the cracked screen of his phone, one unread message from his landlord, 2 job rejections, and a battery at 7%. It all felt like noise. Once a promising freelance designer with big dreams, Jason was now hanging by a thread. Rent was overdue, his internet had been shut off, and the breakup with Claire 3 months ago still echoed in his quiet apartment like a ghost that refused to leave. He hadn't talked to his mom in weeks, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't want her to hear how defeated he sounded. The bus rattled to a stop. He boarded, choosing the window seat furthest from anyone. His bag was light, just his sketchpad, a pen that barely worked, and the wallet he'd had since college. The same wallet that held the last $60 in his name, tucked behind a faded picture of him and his sister from years ago. When he got off 2 stops later, the chill had deepened. He tugged his hoodie over his ears and started the walk home. He didn't notice the wallet was gone until he reached his front door. His hand froze mid-pocket. First the left, then the right, then the backpack. Nothing. He retraced every step, circling back to the stop, checking the sidewalk, even calling the lost and found line for the transit company. No answer. That night, he sat on the edge of his mattress, surrounded by silence and shadows. It wasn't just a wallet. It was his last thread of security, his ID, his bank card, the last of his cash. It was the symbol of how much his life had unraveled without him even realizing. For a moment, he just sat there, elbows on knees, head in his hands. He didn't cry. He couldn't. It was that special kind of numbness that comes when you're too tired to even feel angry anymore. Of course, he muttered to no one. Of course this would happen now. In a life full of quiet disappointments, this one wasn't the loudest. But it was the one that finally made him wonder if things would ever get better. What Jason didn't know, couldn't have known, was that someone had already found the wallet. And that man was about to change everything. Jason hadn't slept much. His room was dim, lit only by the soft gray morning that spilled through the blinds. He stared at the ceiling, phone dead, stomach empty. He didn't expect the knock on the door. It was the kind of knock you don't get unless someone made a mistake, or had something important to say. He opened the door slowly. No one was there. But on the ground sat a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside, wrapped in a sheet of tissue paper, was his wallet. Jason blinked, stunned. He opened it. Everything was there. ID, cards, even the crumpled $60. But there was something else. Tucked behind his ID was a folded note, handwritten on old stationery. The ink had bled slightly at the edges, as if written with careful hands. You remind me of someone I lost, and I couldn't walk away this time. Samuel Grady. Jason read it twice. Then a third time. The handwriting was steady but aged. The message, brief but heavy. He sat down slowly, holding the wallet in one hand, the note in the other. The name. Samuel Grady. It tugged at something faint in the back of his mind, like a half-remembered dream. Where had he heard that name before? He opened the drawer in his nightstand and pulled out an old photo album, flipping through the pages his mother had once put together. Somewhere, buried beneath snapshots of birthdays and school events, was a faded newspaper clipping. Local man loses son in tragic hit and run. He remembered his mom mentioning it, quietly, once, years ago. Samuel Grady. That was the father's name. Jason stood up, suddenly restless. The air in the room felt heavier. This wasn't just a random act of kindness. This was deliberate. Personal. You remind me of someone I lost. He searched online. There were a few mentions of a Samuel Grady in the area, including a listing for a woodworking shop on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but something about it felt right. He didn't know what he expected to find, or what he would say, but there was a feeling rising in his chest, one he hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Jason grabbed his coat, slipped the note back into his wallet, and headed out. He wasn't just going to say thank you. He was going to understand why. The wooden sign above the door read, Grady's Fine Woodworks, carved by hand, the letters slightly worn by time and rain. Jason paused outside, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. A small bell hung above the door. The place smelled of sawdust and cedar. He stepped inside, greeted by the soft hum of sanders and the faint aroma of old pine. The space was warm, cluttered with half-finished chairs and hand-carved shelves. Behind a thick oak workbench stood Samuel Grady, gray-haired, broad-shouldered, eyes alert despite his age. Samuel looked up and immediately froze, as if seeing a ghost. "You came," he said softly, not as a question, but as a statement. Jason gave a nervous smile. "I got your note." Samuel nodded once and gestured toward a stool near the counter. He washed his hands in a utility sink and joined him, wiping them on a rag. For a while, they just talked. Jason kept it light at first, how he'd lost the wallet, where he thought it might have slipped out. He thanked Samuel for returning it, and for the note, though he admitted it had left him confused. Samuel listened without interrupting, hands folded on the bench, gaze steady. When Jason finished, Samuel let out a breath, like he'd been holding it in for years. "You look exactly like my son," he said. "Right down to the way you tilt your head when you're thinking." Jason's eyebrows lifted, startled. "You had a son?" Samuel stood up slowly, walked to a drawer in the far wall, and pulled out a small photo. He handed it to Jason. The boy in the picture had warm eyes, a soft smile, and messy dark hair. Jason stared at it for a long time. The resemblance was undeniable. "He died when he was about your age," Samuel said quietly. "Hit and run. They never found the driver." Jason swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. I think I've heard about it. My mom mentioned it once, a long time ago." Samuel nodded again. "His name was Aaron. He was everything to me. Smart, kind, always drawing." Jason blinked. "Drawing?" Samuel reached beneath the counter and pulled out a sketchpad, worn, edges frayed. Inside were pages filled with pencil drawings, trees, faces, street scenes from Asheville. One of them looked eerily similar to one of Jason's own recent sketches. The silence deepened. Jason felt something strange stirring in him, not fear exactly, but a pull. Something uncanny, familiar. And then Samuel said it, not with accusation, but with something softer, sadder. "The way you looked in that photo on your ID. The look in your eyes. I knew I'd seen it before. I just didn't know if I had the courage to face it again." Jason's heart thudded in his chest. There was more to this. He could feel it. And somewhere, deep in the archives of his childhood, an old, hidden memory began to stir. Jason left the woodworking shop with a weight pressing on his chest like a stone. He didn't go home right away. He walked. 4 hours. Through quiet Asheville streets, past rusted fences and coffee shops where couples laughed inside, a world that kept spinning while his own felt like it had just stopped. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy in the photograph. Aaron. The resemblance. The sketchbook. The pain in Samuel's voice. And something else. Something buried. That night, Jason sat on the edge of his mattress, the sketchbook Samuel had given him still clutched in his hands. He flipped through the drawings again. One of them, a tree on a hill beside an old gas station, jolted something loose in his memory. A flash. Jason at maybe 7 or 8 years old. In the back seat of a car with his dad. Rain falling. Headlights blinding. A loud sound. The car jerking to the side. Then his father's voice, harsh and frantic. "Don't say a word about this. Ever." His dad had been angry that night. Drunk, maybe. Jason remembered the smell of beer and cigarette smoke. He remembered the broken headlight. And he remembered, days later, his mom fighting with his father. Crying. He hadn't understood it back then. But now, sitting in his dim apartment with the walls closing in, he did. The hit and run that killed Aaron might not have been a mystery at all. It might have been his own father. Jason felt sick. The sketchbook slipped from his lap to the floor. All this time, he'd carried the pieces inside him. Unaware. Unquestioning. And now, knowing. What was he supposed to do? He could stay silent. Samuel didn't know the full truth. He wasn't accusing anyone. But then he remembered Samuel's face when he spoke about Aaron. The quiet, raw ache in his voice. And Jason knew what he had to do. The next morning, Jason returned to the workshop. Samuel was sanding the edge of a chair leg. He looked up, surprised but not unkind. Jason didn't sit this time. He stayed standing, shoulders tense, voice quiet. I remembered something, he said. From that night. Samuel's hands slowed. Jason told him everything, the memory, the car, his father's silence, the broken headlight. He didn't cry, but his voice trembled. I didn't know. I swear. I was just a kid. But I think my dad might have been the one. Silence. Samuel set the sandpaper down. For a long moment, he didn't move. Didn't speak. Then he let out a shaky breath and leaned back against the bench. I always wondered, he said, if I'd ever get an answer. I thought I needed justice. But maybe I just needed to not feel crazy anymore. Jason lowered his head. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do with this. Samuel looked at him, really looked, and said, neither do I. But maybe we don't have to know. Maybe just naming the truth is the first step. Jason returned the next weekend. Not to apologize, he knew this wasn't about forgiveness. He came with intent. Samuel met him out back, where a winding forest trail started behind the workshop. They didn't say much at first. Just walked. The crisp autumn air rustled the trees overhead. Their footsteps crunched through the leaves. A silence hung between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was thoughtful. Shared. Eventually, Jason spoke. I can't change what happened. I can't undo what my father did. But I don't want you to carry it alone. Samuel glanced sideways. His expression wasn't bitter. It was tired, but softened. You already have, he said. They started meeting every week. Sometimes walking the same trail. Sometimes sitting on the porch outside Samuel's shop, sipping weak coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Grief, guilt, old movies, bad diner food. Jason started helping around the shop. Sanding, painting, even sketching new designs. It wasn't much, but it was something real. One afternoon, Samuel handed him a dusty box wrapped in twine. Inside was Aaron's old sketchbook, the original one, filled with pages Samuel had never shared. Jason opened it slowly. The lines, the shading, they weren't just drawings. They were feelings on paper. And some pages looked eerily like Jason's own style. Maybe you two would have been friends, Samuel said. Or maybe you're the person he would have grown into. Jason didn't speak. He couldn't. Something shifted in him in that moment. The weight he'd carried, the guilt, the confusion, it didn't vanish. But it felt lighter. Weeks turned to months. Jason found work again, small gigs, then steady clients. His drawings changed. They were warmer, more human. He still visited Samuel every Sunday. They weren't trying to erase the past, just giving it a place to rest. One day, Jason stood on the same hill from one of Aaron's drawings, the gas station still in the distance. He sketched it himself this time, using Aaron's book as a guide. And in voiceover, as if telling the story from a future self, Jason says, he gave me back my wallet, but more than that, he gave me back my sense of self. And somewhere between grief and forgiveness, we both found something we'd lost, each other.